What's up guys, it's Topsy and welcome back to the channel. So let's continue on with our journey of breaking down every Speed Duel set, and today we are going to be covering my personal favorite Speed Duel box in Duelists of Shadows. Few general things before we do begin. First thing I want to go and clear up is that the point of this series is to go ahead and explain the purpose of each individual card in each character deck, whether it be for an important combo and or whether or not they're just a card that it's supposed to just be there for its own individual purpose. Additionally, I want to go and explain what the general idea of what the deck is trying to accomplish via the skill and the composition of the deck. Finally, we're going to go ahead and do a few test hands. With all that being said, if you guys do end up enjoying today's video and would like to support the channel and or have any friends that you'd like to teach how to play speed duels, then feel free to like, subscribe, and share this video. Alright, with all that being said, thank you so much and let's begin. Alright then, so first character up we have is Titan with his Archfiend deck, and Archfiend's a weird deck in this set just because it has a lot of firepower, but the deck is really awkward to pilot because it's the best way I can describe it is too fair, and you'll see what I mean once we start discussing the cards in the deck. So let's go and begin with the skills first. The main skill of the deck is Archfiend's Conscription, which is a very interesting skill for the fact that if you resolve this skill properly, you are able to get a lot of advantage, but if not, then it kind of feels like a wasted skill. The reason I say that is that what this skill does is that it allows you to roll a 6-sided die, and based on the roll, you can do the following effect. If you roll a 2, 3, and or a 4, you're allowed to special summon an Archfiend monster from your hand, deck, and or graveyard of the associated level. But if you roll anything else, you get nothing. Regardless of what you roll, you're gonna have to pay life points based on the die roll times 200. So if you roll a 1, you pay 200. If you roll a 6, you pay 1200, which is a sizable amount, and especially when you take into consideration some of the monsters in this deck. The last thing to note about this skill is the fact that this does lock you into fiend monsters only, but that's not that big of a deal just because, well, the whole deck is nothing but fiends, so you won't even notice it when you play with this deck. As for the second skill, this is more of a gimmick skill, but nevertheless it's still kind of a cool one. Archfiend's Promotion, essentially what it allows you to do is that if you control a Vile Pawn, you are able to tribute it off to summon out a Rook, Bishop, Queen, and or a Knight, which is kind of neat. Additionally, another card that you can actually summon off this effect is this right here, Imprisoned Queen Archfiend, which was one of the miscellaneous cards from this set. So that is kind of neat, but again, as I mentioned, it's too situational just for the very fact that you need Vile Pawn specifically in order to activate it. Now that we have a rough idea of the skills for the deck, let's actually discuss the actual cards. Let's go ahead and begin with the chess pieces, those being Pawn, Death Rook, Dark Bishop, Infernal Queen, Shadow Knight, and finally Terror King. Something that you should know about all the chess pieces is that every single one of them has that maintenance cost. That means that every single turn you're gonna have to pay a certain amount of life points depending on the piece that you have available to you. And the reason for this maintenance cost is the fact that every single one of these chess pieces has a targeting protection effect, but it's not that good. Don't get too excited because that protection effect is solely based on whether or not you properly roll a die. For example, with Vile Pawn, if you roll a 3, you get the protection effect. But as for example, Dark Bishop, which has the best effect, if you roll a 1, 3, or a 6, you get the protection effect. And it varies with each one of these monsters. But additionally, each of these monsters does have an additional effect besides the maintenance cost and the protection effect. Vile Pawn has the effect where your opponent is forced to attack this card during the battle phase. Death Rook has a revival effect if the Terror King Archfiend gets destroyed. Bishop doesn't really have an effect. Infernal Queen is able to boost up an Archfiend monster by 1000 life points. That's kind of cool. Shadow Knight has a restriction where it cuts its attack damage in half. And finally, Terror King Archfiend pretty much negates any monster effects it destroys, so that's kind of neat. As a whole, all the chess pieces are a little bit underwhelming, but you know what, that's what it is. Continuing on, we have another card that is associated with this deck, that being Archfiend General. Now this card is super important and you truly do want to see this card as often as possible, and the very reason for that is that 1, it's a large monster, it has 2100 attack points, but for 2, this card has a great effect where it's able to be sent from your hand to the graveyard in order to search out Pandemonium, which is a godsend to this deck, and you really want to see this card as often as possible if you're dueling, but we'll get into that more in later. The last card that is associated with these cards somewhat is Skull Archfiend of Lightning, and it's kind of just like a pseudo boss monster of the deck because it follows the same gimmick of die rolling and protecting itself from targeting effects. That's all it really does, and then after that we just have a bunch of generic Archfiend monsters. Mist Archfiend is one of the better cards in the deck just for the very fact that you are just able to normal summon it without tributing. However, do be careful just because it does get destroyed during the end phase, and at at that, you take 1,000 points of damage, so use this at your own discretion. Archfiend Soldier, well, it's a vanilla monster, but it has a really good attack stat with 1900 attack points, so we will take that. After that, we have Annihilator Archfiend, which is one of the pseudo boss monsters of the deck, and this card is kind of neat. Just for the very fact that once per turn while you control this card, you are able to go ahead and target one card you control and one card your opponent controls and destroy them. But the cool thing about this is that if you destroyed a fiend monster with this effect on your side of the field, this card gains attack to equal to half the original attack of that monster. The one cool thing about this card is that if you summon it in defense mode, it becomes a really annoying card for your opponent to have to deal with, because every turn you're going to be destroying something on their field. And trust me, there's a lot of cards in this deck that you are gladly going to be getting rid of. The last monster in this deck is Giant Orc, and it's just big bungus. That's it. All right. Now we're on to the spell and trap cards, and I've gone ahead and divided them by goodish cards to straight up bad / gimmick cards. The best card from the spell and trap card lineup is hands down Axe of Despair. And the reason I say that is that the main goal of this deck is going to be primarily beatdown. You want to put as much pressure on your opponent as possible with a lot of your biggest fiend monsters, and Axe of Despair does that really great by boosting a monster by 1,000 attack points. The next best card in the deck, in my opinion, would be Pandemonium, and the reason I say this is that Pandemonium does one thing and one thing only. Well, it does more than one thing, but the most important thing this card does is that it keeps you from having to pay the maintenance cost of these monsters right here. And that is so great, just because you should not have to pay such a hefty cost in order to keep these cards around, because they are not that impressive. Additionally, it does have a neat effect that's not going to come out crazy often, which is that if a archery monster you control gets destroyed by a card effect, you get to search out a archery monster of a lower level than the one that was destroyed. So that's kind of neat, but again, it's not going to happen crazy often. So finally, for the final spell card, we have Foolish Burial, and Foolish Burial is super awkward in this deck, and if I'm going to be honest with you, there is one main target you're going to have in this deck, that being the Terror King Archfiend, not because it has a graveyard effect, but because you have the potential of bringing him back with a card like Archfiend's Roar, but we'll get to that more in just a sec. The last of the decent cards in this deck is Bark of Dark Ruler, and essentially what this card does, it allows you to pay life points in multiples of 100 to go ahead and destroy an opponent's monster. It's a battle trick, and of course, as every Archfiend card, it forces you to pay life points in order to go ahead and activate them, but when you resolve it, it can be really good. And the last of the decent cards is Archfiend's Roar, which is essentially a one-turn revival of a fiend monster, Archfiend monster, my bad. And at that, you have to pay 500 life points in order to revive an Archfiend monster. I mean, it's something, but it kind of sucks. Now, the reason I say that Terror King is the main target is because of the fact that you have Deathstroke in this deck. So the idea is that you activate Roar, you then special summon Terror King Archfiend, and then when it gets destroyed, you can activate the effect of Deathstroke to revive it back. It's super convoluted, but I mean, it's the best you have going for this deck, honestly. All right, then now onto the last 3 cards of the deck, and these are all really bad. Battle Scarred and Checkmate are super gimmicky in the fact that Battle Scarred, all it does is that it targets a archery monster you control, and it forces your opponent to take the same maintenance costs that you are paying, and that's honestly so bad. The next card is Checkmate, which isn't as bad, but the main reason I say this is a bad card is the fact that it's a specific card for Terror King Archfiend, and what it allows you to do is it allows you to tribute it with Archfiend in order to have him attack directly, which can be big because he's large, but it's far too gimmicky. And the last card of the deck is Double Spell. The only reason I don't particularly like this card in this deck specifically is the fact that it's super reliant on your opponent when this deck already struggled to have any good cards available to them. If your opponent has good spells in their graveyard, it can end up being a really good card, but again, super reliant on your opponent. So yeah, the base idea of this deck is the fact that what you're trying to do is just apply pressure on your opponent with a bunch of your large monsters, and with the help of Archfiend's Conscript, it allows you to pretty much to go ahead and attack your opponent to deal as much damage as fast as possible. Now let's go ahead and do some test hands. Okay, so here we have our opening hand for Titan's Archfiend strategy. Let's go and put this to the top of the deck, and let's go begin by activating our skill, Archfiend's Promotion. Not that one, my bad. Archfiend's Conscript. There we go. Now, as I mentioned during the deck breakdown, this is a skill you want to go with more often than not, just because it's the one that gives you the most value the most often. And looking at this hand, it's an interesting one. I'll go ahead and begin by summoning out the Terror King Archfiend, I think. We'll summon out the Terror King Archfiend, we'll set both the Bark of Dark Ruler and the Battle Scarred. Additionally, if you really wanted to, you could also go ahead and activate the effect of Archpriest Conscript right now. It is going to cost you a bit, but you know what? Let's just do it, just for the fun of it. So we'll activate our skill, roll a die. Unfortunately, all we do is just lose 200 life points. So yeah, as I mentioned, I'm not a huge fan of this skill just for the very fact that it's not very good. But yeah, that's pretty much how I would end my turn 1. Just end on the Terror King Archfiend. You have a Dark Ruler to protect you, and Battle Scarred if you really want to make your opponent pay the same life points as you do. All right, let's try another hand. Okay, this hand is it's interesting. Okay, so we'll put this to the top of the deck and let's go ahead and begin. Okay, so first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and activate our skill, the Conscript, and honestly, looking at the hand we have right now, it's not looking all that great, just because since we have the Mist Archfiend and the Skull Archfiend in the field already, not much we can do here. But one thing we can do is we can go ahead and activate the effect of Archpriest Conscript, roll a die, hope we landed. 5. No, we did not. That is really unfortunate. Okay, so all we do here is just lose 1,000 life points. I'm telling you guys, this skill is not that good. If hypothetically you were to have landed a 2, 3, and/or a 4, you could attribute it off that monster for the summon of our Skull of Archfiend of Lightning. But besides that, what I'm thinking of doing instead is activate the Foolish Burial. And with the Foolish Burial, we're going to go ahead and send a copy of Annihilator Archfiend to the grave. The reason I'm sending Annihilator Archfiend to the grave is because it's the Archfiend monster that gives us the better chance of surviving a turn from our opponent. Because we're going to go ahead and set the Archfiend's Roar and pass on that. Now, when it's our opponent's turn, if they go ahead and create their whole board and everything, what we can do is we can activate the Archfiend's Roar on their turn when they declare an attack and special summon out Archfiend Annihilator in defense mode. This pretty much ensures that we'll survive that turn. And all right, and then once it's our turn once again, we have to draw for turn. That's an okay one, and again, not much we can do here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna activate our skill once again, hope we get something this time. Nope, that's another 1,000 life points down the drain. And you kind of just want to do is normal summon Mist Archfiend in this scenario and hope that you can survive, but most likely than not, you're not going to. One more hand, but this time around we'll pretend we're going second, just because this deck really wants to go second. It's not a good going first strategy. Okay, so last hand here, and we'll go ahead and pretend this is us going second, just because this deck struggles way too much going first. So let's say our opponent does their thing. They set a card, they summon a monster, yada yada. All right, now that it's our turn, let's go ahead and draw for turn, and we get Battle's card. It's not a great card. Okay, so what I would do here is, first thing I want to do is activate the effect of Archfiend's General to get access to our Pandemonium. We'll send this to the graveyard, and let's search out the Pandemonium. Okay, so we activate the Pandemonium, and now all of our tree monsters are protected from having to pay any cost. With that on, let's actually activate our skill as well. Hopefully we can actually land it this time. Come on, give us something. This is actually unbelievable. I haven't not landed it once during these test hands. Let's keep rolling until we actually get it. This is like, wow, okay. I'm just very unlucky, guys. Okay, it could have been a worse roll, I guess. So what we're gonna go ahead and get here is we can get the Death Rook, but now I'm actually realizing that I misread the Death Rook, which is my bad. It doesn't even matter because it's an Orny target. Now we have the Death Rook out. We'll go ahead and summon out the Terror King Archfiend. We'll activate the Access Spare on him, and we'll set down the Battle Scarred, and that is our turn. We pretty much have a 3k attack monster, and we don't have to pay any maintenance costs for these guys, and they have targeted protection. Honestly, this is like one of the best case scenarios for this deck. It's still not that good, but I mean, if you get lucky, you can do a ton of damage to your opponent. Let's move on to the next character now. All right, then next up we have Amnael with his alchemy deck, and this is an interesting one just because at first glance this deck makes no sense if you don't know what you're doing, but after trying it out a few times when this set initially released, I ended up quite liking it and taking some fondness to it. Let's talk about it. So the main skill of this deck is Professor of Alchemy, and that's the one that you're going to want to use more often than not. And essentially what this skill does, it allows you to summon out tokens every single turn that can attack your opponent directly. Now these tokens aren't crazy big, they're each 500 attack, 500 defense, so that's decent. However, in order to do this, you are required to banish a level 4 or lower monster from your hand or field to special summon those tokens. That's not that big of a deal just because you can benefit quite a bit from this with specific monsters in this deck. The final thing I should mention about these tokens is that they can't be used for tribute unless you're tributing for the summon of golden homunculi. That's the only card you can tribute summon with these tokens, so really important to keep in mind. As for the other skill, it's essentially a searching skill in order to get cards like the Helios and or the Grand Module from your deck to your hand, and that's pretty much all it does. It does give your Helios a weird protection effect from being banished as well, but honestly I don't particularly like this skill just because these two cards are not super impressive on their own, and the deck needs a lot of help in order to get its engine going. Alright then, so now that we're done with the skills, let's move on to the monsters. So starting off, we have Helios, Grand Module, DDM, and Golden Homunculi. These are all work as boss monsters of the deck. The Golden Homunculi is the true boss monster of the strategy, but these other ones kind of facilitate the same idea as well. Helios and Grand Module both work very similarly in the fact that these cards gain attack based on the amount of banished cards in either player's banish zone. These two cards, one thing you'll notice they share in similar is the fact that they are both very underwhelming because it is surprisingly difficult to banish cards, and that's a trend you'll notice. After that, we have the Golden Homunculi, the main monster of the deck, and the reason I say that is because of the Professor of Alchemy skill, making it fairly easy to summon out. And at that, the cool thing about this card is that it works similarly to these guys, but it focuses on your banish zone. But the cool thing about him is that he already comes with a sizable attack stat, so getting him bigger gets a lot easier. The final card here is Different Dimensional Master, and essentially what this card allows you to do is that by discarding a spell card, which kind of sucks that it has to be a spell card specifically, it allows you to special summon one of your banished monsters, which is a cool way of recovering those cards, but at that, not really a monster that I would go out of my way personally to bring back, just because a lot of the monsters that you want to bring back kind of have their own way of doing that already. Moving on, we have the core of the deck, which in my opinion, those being DD Destroyer, DD Scout Plane, and finally DD Survivor. The reason I call these cards the core of the deck is because it's a good hand whenever you have one of these guys available to you. Destroyer, if he gets banished, he can destroy a face-up card your opponent controls. Scout Plane, if he gets banished, can special summon himself back during the end phase. And DD Survivor, it's also able to special summon himself during the end phase, but if it leaves the field. Now, the reason I refer to these guys as the core is because of the skill, Professor of Alchemy, allowing you to go ahead and banish one of these guys from your hand and or field to go ahead and get a token, and based on who you banish, you get value. So that's kind of cool. And after that, we have the two Chaos Riders, the Chaos Rider Gustav and Displaced Rider. Now, these two cards work very similarly. One banishes normal traps while the other one banishes normal spells, and that's all they have going for them. They just get pretty big. After that, we have Tribe Shocking Virus, which is surprisingly pretty decent in this deck. Now, this is a hyper, super, extremely nerfed version of Tribe Affecting Virus. And what this card does essentially is that if you can banish a monster from your hand and destroy all offensive cards on the field with the same type. The one cool thing about this deck is that it is very type diverse. Wing Beast, Fairy, Beast, Pyro, Fiend, Warrior. You get the idea. You have types of all over the place here. So more likely than not, you'll be able to resolve this effect. Really good card. I wouldn't use this early on in a duel, but it's a pretty good card to go ahead and deal with your opponent. After that, we have Bazoo. Bazoo's just generically really good and kind of goes alongside these guys. Similar effect, but he can banish any monsters in the graveyard to gain attack. So this card can get really, really big very fast. Finally, we have Banisher of Radiance and DD Crow. Banisher of Radiance works as a budget version of Macro Cosmo, which is really good for the deck because you want as many cards as possible banished for either player. And DD Crow pretty much deals with your opponent's graveyard by banishing a card from there. Really weird monsters to have in the deck, but once we do the test hands, you'll understand more what the deck is trying to accomplish. Alright then, moving on to the spell and trap cards now, we have Macro Cosmo alongside Grand Convergence. Macro Cosmo, as I mentioned, it helps you banish everything that goes to the graveyard, while Grand Convergence is a really cool card because if you control Macro Cosmos and you activate this card, you can destroy all monsters on the field. Now, this is a super situational effect, but it's cool whenever you pull it off. After that, we have a bunch of just very odd cards, if I do say so myself. Different Dimensional Gate is kind of an interesting card that has to be utilized very strategically, just for the very fact that it is a way to out an opponent's monster. The cool thing is that if, for example, you activate this and you banish a DD Survivor, it's gonna come back during the end phase, while that monster your opponent controls doesn't. And that's kind of a cool situation as well. It's one of the easier ways to out monster your opponent may have. Again, not a super easy card to use, but it is really good whenever you're able to pull it off. Then we have Different Dimensional Encounter, and it's a way to revive your banished cards, but I don't particularly like the way this card goes about it because it requires both you and your opponent to revive a banished card, and at that card gets revived in face-down defense position, so kind of an iffy one to use. After that, we have the backward removal of the deck in Galaxy Cyclone. I love the fact that this card does have a self-banish effect. We have Soul Release in order to fuel the banish zone, and finally Curse of Aging. It's pretty decent, just for the very fact that it gives you a way of dealing with powerful monsters your opponent may have by reducing all their attack and defense stats by 500, so that's pretty awesome. As I said, the deck is not super easy to pilot, but it gets pretty fun whenever you get the hang of it. For the most part, the point of this deck is you're trying to outgrind your opponent by continuously dwindling down their resources by banishing all their stuff, and you getting value while they get nothing out of it. You'll see more once we do our test runs, which, speaking of, let's get into it. Okay, so here we have our hand, and this is an interesting one. So let's go put this to the top of the deck and let's begin. So the first thing I'm thinking about doing right now is, so this play is going to be very dependent on who you're facing off against, because sometimes DD Crow can be an incredibly powerful card in your deck, or other times it can be just a dud doing absolutely nothing. So depending on your matchup, I would really consider what your play is here. So let's say DD Crow is just not good in the matchup you're going up against. So what I would end up doing is we would go ahead and begin by activating our skill, the Professor of Alchemy skill that is. We would go ahead and banish our DD Crow from our hand to bring out a token. With that token, we would go ahead and tribute it off to summon out the Golden Homunculi. And with that, our Golden Homunculi is going to be at 1800 attack points, and we've pretty much established our boss monster. Depending on how things are looking on the field, you could also activate the effect of Dimensional Gate to pretty much like banish your own token to get rid of an opponent's monster, and then you could summon out Displater for going for direct damage if you wanted to. There's a few ways of going about this turn, but this is one of the ways I thought about right here. One more hand and then we'll move on to the next character. Okay, so this is our final hand, and this is interesting. We actually got one of our special DD monsters, which is always good to see in one of these hands. So what I'm thinking about going about this turn is we're going to go ahead and pretend we're going second here. I've noticed that quite a few of the decks that came out of the set like going second as opposed to going first. Let's say your opponent established a board, right? They have a monster, a set card, whatever. So the first thing I'm going to be doing in this scenario is you can go about this in a few ways. Way one you can go about it is that you could go ahead and bring out the DD Destroyer, right? Depending on what monster your opponent has. If it's like a very large monster you can't out on your own, then I think the play would be summoning out the DD Destroyer, activating the effect of Professor of Alchemy to banish this card. Once you banish it, you're going to get to pop a face-up card in your opponent's field, and with that we get to summon out our token. The token is going to be at 500 and can attack directly. And that would pretty much be the play. You don't have any back row in this scenario to go ahead and protect it, but you went ahead and outed a monster and you go ahead and neg your opponent for 500 life points. So it's okay. Honestly, one of the big issues with this deck is just the fact that it does have a lot of reactive back row to protect yourself. It does struggle with that quite a bit, and some of the monsters just do not do enough on their own. But that's the best we can do with this deck. Alright, on to the next character now. Okay, so now we're on to Kagemaru in the Sacred Beast, and oh boy, this deck is a little rough. It's the worst one pre-constructed, I will say this, but when you get the chance to actually build it yourself, it can be really fun, but we're not doing that right here. So this deck has two pretty good skills. The main skill in unlocking power and the side skill in Victory of the Shadow Riders. So let's go and begin with the main skill. Essentially what this skill allows you to do is that for the summon of Haman, Raviel, and or Uriah, you can use their own summoning mechanics to summon out any of them. So technically what this means is that in order to summon out Haman, you typically need 3 continuous spell cards. To summon out Raviel, you need 3 fiend monsters, and to summon out Uriah, you need 3 continuous trap cards. But with this skill, you can use 3 continuous spell cards to summon out Raviel, or you can use a mix and match of these cards. Or as an example, you can use a continuous spell, a fiend monster, and a continuous trap card to summon them out. You can combine them in any way, shape, or form to bring these cards out. There are some downsides to this, but it does try to make summoning out these cards a lot easier. But so I kind of like that ability of that skill. As for the other skill in Victory of the Shadow Riders, this is a continuous spell skill that does require you to draw 1 less card at the beginning of the duel, but what this skill does is that at the beginning of the duel, you flip this card over and it immediately adds you one of the Sacred Beast monsters from your deck to your hand. It immediately replaces its effect by giving you advantage like that. But the coolest thing about this skill is the fact that once per turn, you are allowed to discard 1 card in order to special summon a fiend monster from your graveyard that has a 0 attack and 0 0 defense. What are you trying to summon off this effect? Well, the main card you're summoning out is Dark Summoning Beast. Really good effect, but it's a bit difficult to set up. But yeah, that's the 2 skills. Genuinely, it's completely up to you what you prefer using. But in this version of the deck, I would say you probably want to go with the main skill just because the deck is all over the place. Okay, so now it's time to talk about the deck. So starting off, we have the 3 boss monsters of the deck, Hamon, Ravio, and Uriah. As I mentioned, all 3 of these have their own unique summoning conditions, and at that, they each have their own unique effects while they're face up on the field. Hamon pretty much allows you to burn your opponent for 1000 damage each time he destroys a monster, and when it's in face up defense position, it forces your opponent to attack this card if they want to declare an attack that turn. So that's a pretty decent boss monster. Ravio pretty much gives you a token on your field each time your opponent summons a monster, and once per turn you're able to tribute one of those tokens on the field in order to make him gain attack. So that's pretty decent. And finally, we have Uriah, my personal favorite, and unfortunately, arguably the worst one of the 3. For the very reason that it begins with 0 attack and defense, but it has the potential of getting bigger than both Hamon and Ravio because it gains 1000 attack points per continuous trap card in your graveyard. What this card's able to do is once per turn, it's able to pop it back where your opponent has, but your opponent is not able to respond to the activation of the effect, which is pretty good. Alright then, now let's go and move on to the rest of the monsters of the deck, starting off with Dark Summoning Beast. Now, this guy is pretty incredible, just for the very fact that you can cheat out any Sacred Beast monster from your hand, because he considers himself the full tribute for them. The one downside to this is it's a level 5 monster, so you want to utilize the effect of Victory Star Shadow Riders in order to do so. And then after that, we just have a bunch of supplementary feed monsters with Mad Reloader for hand consistency, D-Boys to get swarming the field, Gravity Orb is bad, Goblin King kind of works as a pseudo boss monster on its own, but it's not that good either, and Grave Protector has decent defense stats, but it's okay only. And yeah, that's pretty much the monster lineup. Alright then, let's go ahead and move on to the spell cards now, beginning with the field spell of the deck, Fallen Paradise. And this field spell is pretty damn good because this field spell, if you control one of the 3 Sacred Beast monsters, it pretty much gives them all targeted protection and card destruction protection. So it becomes really difficult to deal with these cards while they're face up on the field if you have this field spell. But in addition, if you control one of these guys, you're allowed to draw 2 cards per turn as well. So this field spell does quite a bit for the deck, but the main thing is that you need to see the field spell, and at that you need to establish one of these guys. After that, we have quite a few continuous spell cards in order to fuel the Hamon, those being Cerulean Skyfire, Veil of Darkness, Backup Squad, and Different Dimensional Gate. We already talked about Different Dimensional Gate, so no need to cover it anymore, but Backup Squad is kind of a generic card that each time you take 1000 damage, you draw 1 card, pretty okay. Veil of Darkness, each time you draw and you drew a dark monster, you can reveal it to your opponent, send it to the graveyard, and draw 1 more card. So that's an okay way of getting your graveyard field up to get like Dark Summoning Beast in the grave and or like Mad Reloader in order to proc the effective victory of the Shadow Riders, or in order to see your Sacred Beast monsters a bit faster, depending on your need. Finally, we have the Cerulean Skyfire, which is the dedicated continuous spell card of Hamon, and this card is pretty great. And the reason I like this card so much is that it does something super unique. It has a spell negation built into it that is really interesting in the way that it works, because it's a situational effect. Whenever your opponent activates a spell card, it immediately negates it, which is really powerful. And at that, if you control Hamon when this is activated, you can switch your Hamon to defense mode, and it pretty much gives you protection. It's pretty neat the way that it works. Now it's time to move on to the trap cards. And the rest of the trap cards are all continuous trap cards in order to fuel the Uriah. Those being Awakening of the Sacred Beast, Unending Nightmare, Age of Gaia, Swamp Mirror, and Final Attack Orders. Final Attack Orders is not great in this deck, unless you have an established Sacred Beast monster. Most of the time, you're just going to want to tribute this card off for Uriah. Swamp Mirror gives you a decent statted monster on your field, so that's pretty cool. Age of Gaia's gives you a sizable amount of life points, but you lose those life points when this card gets destroyed, or just leaves the field. Unending Nightmare is a pseudo form of backward removal, but it only pops face-up cards. And finally, we have Awakening of the Sacred Beast, which is the unified trap card for all the Sacred Beast monsters. And it gets effects based on the amount of Sacred Beast monsters you control. If you control 1 of them, each time your opponent summons the monster, you gain life points equal to its attack. If you control 2 of them, it negates any activated effects your opponent's monsters activate. And finally, if you have all 3 of them, any monsters sent to the graveyard are banished instead for your opponent. So that's a pretty neat effect. If you can stack all 3 of them, it can become very oppressive for your opponent. Additionally, it does give you a once per turn effect where if you control 1 of these, or just a level 10 monster monster, you're allowed to add a continuous spell and or trap card from your graveyard to your hand. Honestly, a lot of these spells and trap cards in this deck are just really situational, so they don't offer that much value on their own. And for the most part, this deck is just trying to turn out one of their boss monsters as fast as possible, and you kind of live and die by these cards because the rest of the deck does almost nothing. So let's go and demonstrate that by a few test hands. Okay, so I just realized that I spent like the last 10 minutes explaining some test hands for this deck and I did not record any of it. So let's try this again. Why don't we? So let's go and begin by putting the Grave Protector to the top of the deck. For hand number 1, we're going to go ahead and begin with the main skill, Unlocking Power. In this scenario, we already have our Sacred Beast in hand, so that's pretty cool. But now what we're going to do is we're just setting D-Boys and passing on that. Now, with that, this pretty much ensures that we're going to have another monster on the field in order to have a tribute fodder for our Sacred Beast monster. So it's our opponent's turn, they destroy the D-Boys, and we get to summon out another one from the deck. And D-Boys is such a bad recruiter for the deck, but you know what? Beggars can't be choosers. So we'll go ahead and take the 1000 damage and summon it in attack mode, because it forces you to do so. Crazy. Alright, so it's our turn now, we get to draw, and oh, that's a pretty good one. So one of the cards that I don't like in this deck in particular is Different Dimension Gate, because you have to activate that to get rid of a monster on the field, both for your opponent's side and your side, which really sucks because you want to keep those monsters for the tribute fodder, but it's whatever. So we're going to go ahead and activate the backup squad, and we're going to summon out the Goblin King, and we're going to tribute them all off to summon out Haman. And with that, yep, you've established your boss monster pretty much immediately off the effect of Unlocking Power. That's part of the reason why I think this skill kind of works a little better for the deck, even though I do think the Victory of the Shadow Riders is a better skill overall. And yeah, that was a pretty good hand. If you didn't have a Sacred Beast in hand, you would probably have to stall until you got one, but that's essentially what you want to do with this deck. One thing I did want to go ahead and mention real quick is that the burn damage of D-Boys would not trigger the effect of Backup Squad in case you thought it did, because Backup Squad only activates when your opponent inflicts the damage, whether it be from battle or card effect. The D-Boys damage is inflicted by yourself, so these do not synergize well with each other, so just so you know. Okay, let's try out another test hand. Okay, not bad. This time around, we're actually going to be doing a test hand around the Victory of the Shadow Rider skill. So we'll go ahead and activate this, we'll move it to the back row, and we'll go ahead and begin with 3 cards in our hand this time around. So we'll put this at the top of the deck and top of the deck. Okie dokie. So with this hand, it's kind of interesting one here. Actually, it's kind of good. So what I'm thinking about doing is we're going to go ahead and add a Sacred Beast monster off the effect of Victory of the Shadow Riders. The thing that sucks is that most of the time you're never going to be choosing Uriah, even though it is my favorite. So we summoned Haman last one. I think Haman is the best one overall. So this time around, we'll summon out Raphael. So that's to our hand. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to begin by setting Mad Reloader. It's important that you set Mad Reloader because with Mad Reloader set, you're going to be able to trigger the effect of Victory of the Shadow Riders by getting a Fiend with 0/0 stat line. And that's very, very important. We'll see why. All right, you end our turn. It's our opponent's turn now. They're going to be able to out the Mad Reloader fairly easily. So they destroy it. It triggers the effect, and we're going to get to send the Dark Summoning Beast and the Grave Protector to the graveyard. And we get to draw 2 cards. Perfect. Our opponent ends their turn, and we get to draw for turn now. Okay, there we go. Not a great draw, but that's fine. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and activate the Victory of the Shadow Riders, and we're going to discard 1 card. Probably the card you want to discard is Aged Gaius, just because it's not a good card. So we'll go ahead and send this to the graveyard. And with that, we're going to get to special summon a Fiend with 0/0 stat line from the graveyard. And that's Dark Summoning Beast right there. So yeah, we're going to be tributing off the Dark Summoning Beast to summon out Raphael from our hand. Realistically, if you really wanted to, you could also have summoned out the Haman from the deck, which is pretty crazy. And probably would have been the right play just because it's the better card overall and it thins out the deck a little bit more. All right, then now with Raphael on the field, what we're going to be doing next is we're going to be summoning out the Goblin King, and Goblin King's attack stat is going to go up to 1000, but realistically by the point that it's your opponent's turn, it's going to be probably at 2000, because what happens here is that you're going to clear your opponent's board. If they summon a monster, the effect of Raphael is going to activate and it's going to give you a token on your field. With another Fiend on the field, it's going to raise the Goblin King's attack to 2000. And with that, you're kind of chilling on here. But yeah, that's essentially how you want to go and play out the hand with Victory of the Shadow Riders. All right, now onto the final character. Alright then, so last up we have Adrian Gecko with his Cloudians, and this is a really pretty good deck, honestly. Really annoying to deal with, and you'll see why. So let's go and begin with the main skill of the deck, Fog Warning, and this is hands down the best skill you want to play with this deck. Honestly, I don't think there is a argument as to which one you should be using. This is the one you want to use. And what this skill does essentially is that each time a fog counter is put on a monster, you give it an additional fog counter, and that's huge just because with this skill alone, whenever you summon out one of your Cloudian monsters, they get their effect almost immediately, making them have a lot of value very fast. And at that, this effect stacks with cards like Squall, which is pretty damn amazing. So super good skill, really crucial to the deck, and it makes a world of difference. As for the other skill, Cloudy Skies of Grey, this skill is neat, but I think it's far too situational in order to make good use of it, because what this skill does is if a cloudy monster you control is destroyed, any fog counters it had on it are distributed to another monster on the field, which is cool, but the main reason I don't particularly like this skill is just for the very fact that all cloudy monsters have battle protection effects, so it's pretty difficult to out them unless your opponent outed them with card effects. So I feel like this skill doesn't come up as often as you would like it to. So that's just my personal opinion. Alright, but now it's time to actually talk about the cards in the deck. Let's begin with the three, I guess, staples of the deck, those being Acid Cloud, Atlas, and Cirrostratus. Acid Cloud and Cirrostratus are the best ones in the deck in my opinion, because Acid Cloud is able to pop back row while Cirrostratus is able to pop monsters. And in order to use this effect, you need to remove 2 fog counters from each of them in order to do so. As for the Atlas, this one has a more steep cost because it requires you to remove 3 fog counters from it, but it's for a very good reason because each time you can remove 3 fog counters from this card, and if you do, you're able to rip a card out of your opponent's hand, which is extremely powerful and can be abused in really nasty ways. Alright, next up we have, let's actually talk about the 2 boss monsters of the deck. Actually 3, my bad. Cloudian Eye of the Typhoon, Fog King, and Cloudian Nimbusman. So, beginning off with Eye of the Typhoon, this is probably going to be the main card you're going to summon out most of the time, and what this card does is that whenever he declares an attack, all monsters your opponent controls change their battle position, meaning that if your opponent starts playing defensively, he can start dealing a lot of damage. After that, we have Cloudian Nimbusman, and this card is pretty neat just for the very fact that he can get enormous, like way bigger than Eye of the Typhoon. And the reason for that is that he gains attack based on the amount of foul counters on the field. So if you've been just accumulating a bunch of them throughout the duel, he can get massive, and there's certain things you can do in this deck that make him like a real menace. Alright, and the last card for the deck for like the pseudo boss monsters is Fog King. This card's unique in the way that it works because it is a true tribute monster that can be tribute summoned with 1 tribute, and it gains attack based on the original attack set of the monster you tributed for that's tribute summon. So let's say you tributed Nimbusman and Mother Grizzly, he will gain 2400 attack points. The cool thing about this card is the fact that it keeps either your opponent from tributing cards in general, so no tribute summoning, no tributing for effects like Lava Golem, etc. After that, we have a few other Cloudian monsters with Cloudian Ghost Fog. What this card does is that it's able to distribute fog counters equal to the level of the monster that destroyed them. So if a level 4 monster destroys this card, you get to distribute 4 fog counters onto the field. So that's an easy way of getting a lot of fog counters. Additionally, we also have Cloudian Storm Dragon. This card is interesting just for the fact that it's a special summon card, and that's the only way it can be summoned out. But additionally, it's able to also distribute fog counters, which is a really difficult thing to do in this deck. Last Cloudian monster in the deck is Cloudian Turbulence, and this guy is probably the least intuitive one to work with just for the fact that his effect, all it really does is that it allows you to summon out a smoke ball from the hand, deck, and or graveyard by tributing a fog counter on it. And there are some cool things you can do with this effect, but it's not the easiest card to work with, but we'll talk more about that in the test hands. Finally, we have Mother Grizzly and Vortex Trooper as just the generic monsters of the deck. Mother Grizzly gives you access to pretty much every Cloudian monster in the deck, including Nimbusman, which is really cool. While Vortex Trooper, it pretty much allows you to mulligan your hand in order to get the proper cards you need. So this card is pretty damn good in the deck. Now let's move on to the spell cards. First off, we have Cloudian Aerosol, the best card in the deck. What this card does is that it essentially allows you to, upon activation, you discard a Cloudian monster, and then you target a monster on the field, and you place fog counters on it equal to the level of the monster you discarded. So it's an easy way of distributing fog counters. But the best thing about this effect is that in the graveyard, you can go ahead and banish it in order to go ahead and special summon a Cloudian monster from the deck. And that is huge because that's one of the easiest ways you're going to get to summon cards like Cloudian Eye of the Typhoon and or the Nimbusman in order to take games out of nowhere. After that, we have Cloudian Squall. This card is incredible, and as long as you can keep it face up on the field, you are going to be a menace to your opponent because every single standby phase, you place a fog counter on each face up monster on the field, including your opponent's field. After that, we have the Diamond Dust Cyclone. And this is a really convoluted removal card for the very fact that you're able to target a monster on the field with 4 or more foul counters on it and destroy it. The cool thing about this card is the fact that it can destroy a monster from either field. After that, we have Fog Control, which is a really unique card because this can either help you a lot by giving your cloudy monsters a lot of foul counters, or hurt your opponent by giving them a lot of foul counters in order to get the effect of Dust Cyclone live. Finally, for the spell cards, we have Summon Cloud. This card is pretty fantastic. It's a continuous spell card that allows you to special summon a lower 4 lower Cloudian from your hand and or graveyard. Do keep in mind that if you activate this effect and you summon something from the grave, it does destroy this card. Finally, we have the trap cards. We have Raging Cloudian. Raging Cloudian is a really interesting card in the way that it works, just for the very fact that if I forgot to mention this earlier, but all Cloudian monsters have the effect that if they're changed to defense position, they get destroyed. And this is one of the gimmicks this card kind of tackles, because if a Cloudian monster is destroyed by its own effect, you're able to target that Cloudian monster, special summon it back to the field in attack position, and also that card cannot be changed to defense position anymore by card effects. So it's a way to protect your Cloudian monsters from being destroyed by their own card effect. Super convoluted card, but it's kind of neat in the way that it works, and we'll see if I can get a hand where I can try it out for you guys. Finally, for the Cloudian cards, we have Rainstorm. Now, super important thing to keep in mind about this card. This is a good card, don't get me wrong, but in order to activate this card, you have to be able to reduce the Cloudian monsters you control attack stat by either 1,000 or 2,000, meaning that your monster has to have at least 1,000 attack points in order to activate this card. Alright, with that being said, if you control a Cloudian monster, you're able to reduce its attack by either 1,000 or 2,000, and based on how much you reduce it by, you can activate one of these effects. Destroy a spell or trap card your opponent controls, or destroy 2 cards your opponent controls. A lot of your Cloudian monsters are fairly weak, so this card is not going to be live all that often, but whenever it is, it can get some crazy value out of it. Last card of the deck is Wall of Disruption, one of the best trap cards in all of Speed Duels. Alright, with that being said, deck is pretty fun. It's primarily a control deck that tries to take the duel out of nowhere with cards like Cloudian, either Typhoon and or Nimbus Man. Let's go and try out some test hands now. Alright then, so here is our opening hand with Adrian. Shit. Never mind, I guess. This is our opening hand with Adrian Gecko. Okay, so as I've said, most of the time you want to go ahead and begin with Fog Warning just because it's the better skill overall. So we'll put the Fog King at the top of the deck and let's go ahead and begin. So first thing I want to do here is I want to go ahead and begin by summoning out the Cloudian Cirrostratus. Not only is Cirrostratus slightly bigger than Turbulence, but it also gives us the potential of outing any monster our opponent goes ahead and summons. But we're also going to go ahead and set the Fog Control and the Diamond Dust Cyclone. So Cirrostratus gains a token on its own and then gains another one off the effect of Fog Warning, and we end our turn there. Our opponent does their thing, they summon out a monster, and they're going to deal a lot of damage, keep in mind, just because Cloudians are fairly weak, but we get to keep them at least. We get to draw for turn now, and we draw into Fog King, which is not fantastic, but it is okay. So what we're going to be doing here is, depending on how the board is looking for our opponent, what we can do is we can remove the tokens off the effect of Cirrostratus and pop a monster our opponent has. After that, we could also summon out the Cloudian Turbulence, and it's going to be gaining a counter for each Cloudian monster on the field. So it's going to gain 2 initially, and then it gains an additional 1 off the effect of Fog Warning, bringing him up to 3. And with that, we can actually remove one of the counters off the Cloudian Turbulence and summon out a what is called Smoke Ball from the deck. And the cool thing about this interaction is that with Smoke Ball on the field, what you can do is activate the effect of Fog Control and either tribute away the Cloudian Smoke Ball to give one of your opponent's monsters 3 counters, putting him at 4 counters with the effect of Fog Warning, and then chaining the effect of Diamond Dust Cyclone to pop that opponent's monster and draw 1 card. Or additionally, what you could do is tribute the Smoke Ball, give the 3 counters to Cloudian Cirrostratus, putting him at 4 off the effect of the Fog Warning and popping 2 more cards on your opponent's side of the field. Up to you completely, but I just think that being able to utilize these 2 cards in tandem is pretty good. So these go to the graveyard. If you really wanted to, you could remove another token off the Turbulence and summon out the Smoke Ball back to the field once again to pretty much ensure you have another monster. But yeah, that's essentially what you want to do with the turn 1 with this hand. Let's try another test hand. Well, this is interesting. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin by... Okay, let's put this to the top of the deck, and honestly, this hand is really weird to work with just because in order to use the Aerosol, you do need multiple Cloudians, and we don't have that going on right now. So we're going to go and just begin by summoning out the Vortex Trooper and passing on this. Or additionally, what you could also do is you could have just normal summoned out the Vortex Trooper let's actually do that. We'll normal summon Vortex Trooper and activate the effect. We'll go ahead and shuffle into the deck the Eye of the Typhoon, and additionally the Diamond Dust Cyclone. So let's go ahead and shuffle this up, and we'll draw 2 cards. Ooh, not bad at all. So we'll set the Wall of Disruption, and then we have Zero Stratus for the crackback as well. Of course, we are also working off Fog Warning as our skill, and we end our turn with that. Now, our opponent's going to be very tempted to destroy the Vortex Trooper, choose to deal a ton of damage, so we're going to go ahead and take it. We get to draw a card off the effect of Vortex Trooper, and our opponent ends their turn. We just draw 1 more card, and look at that. We have an entirely new hand off this alone, and we're kind of chilling. Now with this hand, there's quite a bit of things you can do right here. There is really no bad play you can make here. You could summon out the Turbulence to go ahead and get the Smoke Bow in rotation, which is kind of okay. Not the best play by any means, but it's a cute one you could do. Another thing you could do is you could summon out the Zero Stratus and then just pop monsters your opponent controls. Depending on how many they have, you can get rid of all of them if you really wanted to. Or another thing you could do is the scummier play, which is summoning out Atlas. And I kind of want to demonstrate that to you guys. Let's go and begin by normal summoning out Atlas. With Atlas on the field, it's going to gain 2 counters, 1 for himself and 1 off the effect of Fog Warning. After that, we're going to activate the effect of Cloudy and Aerosol. We're going to go ahead and send Cloudy and Turbulence to the graveyard now. And that's going to give the Cloudy and Atlas 4 more counters because it's a level 4 monster, putting him at 6 counters. And because Fog Warning is not a once per turn effect, each time you place Fog counters, it's going to gain 1 additional one, so putting him at 7. If you wanted to, you could go ahead and remove 6 counters off this thing to go ahead and rip 2 cards out of your opponent's hand. And depending on how crazy they went on their turn, that could be enough to get rid of their entire hand. So let's do that. Let's say that's enough to go ahead and get rid of your opponent's entire hand. And with that, they have no cards in hand left, and they're just chilling on a monster. And because we do have Wall of Disruption, that can be easily used to deal with whatever monster they have. Additionally, with the Air Soul the next turn, you can go ahead and summon out one of your boss monsters and then just do crazy amount of damage. And with your opponent's hand reduced, it's really hard to get back into the duel. But yeah, that's essentially how you would go ahead and play with the Cloudian deck. And it's a pretty fun strategy. You should give it a try. Alright guys, and with that, this concludes today's video. If you guys have any question regarding any of the character decks we covered in today's video, then let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you're a big fan of Speed Duels and would like to check out some of my other content, then consider sticking around because I have tons and tons of different Speed Duel content, whether it be my Speed Duel progression series, my custom Speed Duel sets, and or just any of my other Speed Duel stuff. But yeah, with that being said, thank you so much for sticking by and have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.